So friends, welcome back to Opus Elenae, where we love a project series. My plan was actually not to launch this whole German clothing series by making something for myself, since the priority is making sure that partner, as the one who will actually be up in court at Yule, stepping down as Baron, is properly clothed for the event. But then I had to order the fabric for shirts, and it didn't come in to get them done for this video, and I hadn't gotten a chance to sit down and finalize the design for his outfit, let alone pattern anything, so it just kind of happened that the only thing I had both fabric and time to make was headwear for myself. That headwear will consist of 3 parts. 1, the wulsthaube, a kind of padded roll, sometimes attached to a coif, sometimes not, that goes on the back of the head to simulate ridiculously exaggerated braids. 2, the steuchlein, a veil that goes over the wulsthaube to smooth things out. This can be a plain white rectangle that's tied and draped, or it can be a shaped and gathered piece of material that's decorated with ribbons and embroidery. 3, the tellerbarret. This is the iconic platter-shaped hat with decorative slashes and a ton of feathers that goes on top of it all. All right, everyone, grab your cuppa. Today, I am drinking Rue the Day from Friday Afternoon Tea. It is a rich black tea with dark cherry and star anise, both of which cut through the smokiness of this Russian-style tea nicely. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting from the scalp out since each successive layer builds on the last one. I found some instructions online about how to draft and make my own wulsthaube, but I also found something even better, a pattern. And best of all, it's a pattern from a company I trust. There are not a lot of German Renaissance clothing patterns available out there, and the most widely available are pretty much trash. When using ready-made patterns, have a historical clothing friend vet them. The frustration of using a bad pattern is not worth it. I'm going to be using the wulsthaube pattern from Thimble and Plume. Not only are they really talented German reenactors, but they also have a YouTube channel that has a lot of resources that I'm going to be using over the course of this whole series. Because I went through all of my fabric recently, I know that I have plenty of white linen, so I'm just going to grab a couple of the larger matching scrap pieces to make the haube. Construction is all pretty straightforward. Sew the halves of the coif part together, fell that seam, attach the roll pieces by sandwiching the coif between them and sewing that seam, then things get fun. The coif part gets folded up within the roll and the opposite seam gets sewn, leaving a small gap to turn everything right side out. The roll doesn't extend to the ends of the coif, so we'll have to just hem those little bits of raw edge. Before I stuff the roll, I'll add the headband facing and ties. The facing is just a long strip of fabric that's sewn to the front edge, folded under, and felled into place. The facing is optional. Now that I have the wulsthaube done, I need to figure out how to make the steuchlein or veil that covers the haube. Because I only have one head, two hands, and a whole slew of proprioception issues, I decided to get a mannequin head to help me drape my steuchlein. And added bonus, this will come in quite handy if I style any other cosplay wigs. I've seen long rectangular veils worn tied in back with the long ends either left free and draped or twisted up across the top of the head in front of the haube. The style that I really like though is smooth over the top of the head and gathered at the back of the head or nape of the neck. To get a starting place, I'll measure around the head where a headband would sit and from the forehead over the wulsthaube to the nape of the neck. Then I can rip a rectangle of muslin to those dimensions and start draping it over the head form. The two front corners will get pinned at the nape of my neck and the rest of the fabric pulled back and draped over the wulsthaube. I want to be really intentional about how the fabric lays over the top of the head. In my inspiration portraits, they are really smooth and clean looking, and I want to make sure that I get that right. I also want the gathers in the back to lay a specific way. I've seen people make them where they're just gathered in the center, but I want my gathers to be lower near the nape of the neck so that the folds make a kind of fan shape on the back of my head. Once I have everything the way that I want it, I'll draw a line all the way across the folds to indicate how the steuchlein should be cut. After I have it off the mannequin head, I'll connect those markings and smooth the curve to make the muslin into my no seam allowances pattern. Before I cut my fashion fabric, I'm going to try everything on my own head just to double check that it fits properly and that the folds in the back are the right size, since I want them to look pleated rather than gathered. Onto the silk. One of the fantastic things about having recently reorganized my fabric is that I'm much more familiar with what I have, so I knew I had this lovely pale silver washed silk that's been sitting in my stash since literally before Tornado was born. That would work perfectly. I thought about doing something extremely fancy TM with this, like embroidery or gold work or fancy lace or something, but then I came across this picture and loved it so much. I have some black chiffon ribbon that will make fantastic stripes without being time-consuming or fussy to sew on. I marked out where the stripes will go and used some of my trusty silk thread from A.O. Window Weaver to sew it on. I'm planning to use eyelets to gather the back of the steuchlein, and I want an extra layer of material for sturdiness, so I'm also going to add a facing of the same ribbon to finish the edge and provide that support. And now it's time to make said eyelets. So many eyelets. Eyelets until I die. I'm using Gutermann silk buttonhole twist to sew them so they'll be nice and sturdy and last for as long as it took me to sew them all, which is approximately forever. For the lacing in the back, I wanted a thin but strong cording. I didn't have enough time to loosen something, and I didn't have any ready-made cord, so I braided 3 strands of Aowen silk together, and it worked really well. Once it was finished, I laced it up and discovered that using all of the eyelets resulted in too much bulk in the gathers, and that using every other pair of eyelets worked way better, which means I sewed twice as many eyelets as I needed to, because of course I did. Thank you to all of my current and continuing Ko-fi members. Your support and the support of all of my members and croissants makes it easier to do what I do and to provide quality content for everyone. Thank you all so much. Stick around after this brief commercial break to see Phase 3. I was originally going to use the thimble and plume Docken beret pattern for this part, but in chatting with my friend Anne, who is my personal German clothing expert, her blog link is in the description. Seriously, go check it out, it's amazing. I found out that this style of hat was more popular in the Saxony region, think Kronek style gowns, than South Germany, which is the style I'm planning on making. So back to the drawing board. I knew that I didn't want to do the round-brimmed pizza pie hat that is commonly associated with landsknecht clothing. The other style I really liked from my research had the same kind of folded and slashed square crown, but instead of the brim being solid, it was made of these kinds of tabs. Since I didn't find a whole lot of hat tutorials that covered everything, I'll be using my time-honored technique, winging it. I have just a bit of black wool melton left over from cutting out the interminable embroidered sabriel surcoat, and I'm going to start by cutting out the largest square I can fit onto the piece. I can always cut it smaller later if I need to. But it turns out I didn't need to. I like the size of the finished square. I traced a circle the size of my head on the underside and proceeded to try a couple of different muslins to see how to create the tab look I want. On half of it, I tried small rectangles folded in half to form individual tabs, and on the other, I tried a long piece of fabric folded double, pinned to the hat, and then cut to form tabs as seen in some landsknecht woodcuts. I ended up liking the way the individual tabs looked because they were overlapped. They looked less sparse than the other way. Once I found the size and arrangement of tabs that I liked, I cut them out in wool. Next, I needed to deal with the corner decorations on the crown. Normally, a straight line or slash is cut into the wool, and the edges are turned under and sewed down, making a kind of pointy oval shape. This Melton is too thick to hem like that though, so I'm going to just cut the leaf shapes out. In order to make sure they all look the same, I'm going to make a paper template and trace each corner with white gel pen before cutting them out. Time to deal with the lining. I want to line the hat in white since my dress will be red and black. I do not, unfortunately, have any white wool, which would have been my first choice. I want something that will hold its own against the weight of the black Melton, and after a bit of playing with various fabrics that I have, I found that a double layer of heavy white linen worked quite well. Since the Melton doesn't fray, I'm just going to fold the edges of the linen under and attach the two layers together with a prick stitch. Then I'll do the same thing around each leaf cutout to keep the two layers of fabric together and repeat with each separate tab. This took approximately as long as the eyelets took. Forever. The next step is to attach the corners together on the top of the hat, which I did with a couple stitches of buttonhole twist. I noticed that the new corners where the fabric was folded weren't as sharp as I wanted them, so I sewed a couple of stitches to keep those nice and crisp as well. Time for the tabs. I folded each one in half, linen side in, and pinned them on the underside of the hat before whip stitching them into place. This, unlike the other steps, did not take forever. I know the stereotype for landsknecht hats is to be just dripping with feathers, but I wanted to be a little bit more measured in my plumage, for now at least. So I'm just going with 3 jaunty feathers. I'm sewing them into place, but I'm doing so in a way that can be easily reversed. I'm not sewing through the quill or anything. If I want to add or change feathers in the future, it'll be very easy. And last but not least, I'm adding a quick tie to the hat. I'm using one long piece of twill tape, partially to help the hat sit higher in my head, and partially because I'm lazy, and this was easy. I'm glad to know that I haven't lost my wing it and aim for the correct silhouette touch. I feel both super accomplished that I finished phase 1 of Project German Yule and very daunted that I haven't even made it to the necessary clothing. It's okay though. I still have 3 months to go. If you enjoy this channel and want to support it, you can do that monetarily on my Ko-fi or for free by sharing this or any of my videos with friends and social media. If you're interested in finding a fantastically supportive community that loves history and crafting, come join us on the Discord at the link in the description box below. Until next time, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Well.